Hello, my name is Kelly Rojas, and this is my older adult oral video presentation. So, the stage that my interviewee and I primarily focused on was intimacy versus isolation, which occurs in your early adulthood, about 18 to your early 40s, and it deals primarily with building the relationships, both social and intimate, with a focus on the intimacy and closeness of those relationships. It also emphasizes a balance of the give and take within the partners of that relationship, and it also heavily stresses not losing a person's identity within his or her given relationship. The major component, too, of this stage is that if the intimacy is not established, isolation may affect the progress into adulthood with those adulthood relationships. The main areas of focus that we talked about were my interviewee's marriage, my interviewee having children, her establishing her career, and her children's graduations and moving on to college. The reason why I picked my interviewee, which is my aunt, is because she faced a lot of adversity in her life. I know from my mother what she had to go through, but obviously she's not old enough to be the older interviewee. So my aunt decided to help me out, and their father was an alcoholic through their entire lives. Their mother was essentially a single mother working to provide for 4 children on a lower level and a lower classes paycheck. So that will heavily be discussed throughout the project. The challenges faced within this stage would be the graduation from high school, her own graduation, and college despite facing adversity of her alcoholic parent. Also managing her children and her career success. Surviving the life demands and schedules of her own life outside of work and the life of her children. Her children were very active in their school, within other academic obligations after school, within sports. They were very well rounded. Also, her husband owned his own company, so the work demands of that and having limited child assistance was very heavy. He owned his own business and lived at his shop. He was a mechanic, so he lived at his shop and would come home on weekends. So that was the relationship that they had. So it was very hard because my aunt was essentially a single mother. Reaching the empty nest syndrome when her children were reaching college age and meeting the financial burdens related to her children attending college, because everyone wants a better life for their children, and my aunt wanted a better life for her children. So meeting the financial burdens of that was very difficult. But the accomplishments within that stage would be she graduated from her high school as salutatorian. She also was on the first winning state basketball championship for that high school. And that's huge because that is what the high school is known for, winning their basketball championships. That brought not only herself pride, but also for her city. She also graduated magna cum laude from Immaculata University. Her marriage was a huge accomplishment. Gaining a person to love and have children with was huge for her. Also, knowing that she would never be married to someone that was like her father, and we'll talk about that later on. But the birth of her children, celebrating 20 years of marriage, her children moving on to their collegiate careers, and her own job promotion. The psychosocial crisis resolution would be her father's habitual drinking. Constantly, he would just drink and drink. There was a time when she was a child and she was in about kindergarten, so probably around 5, that she was all dressed up and ready to go to her school Halloween parade, and she was unable to attend her school Halloween parade because her father took her to the bar to drink instead of going out and enjoying being a child. Unfortunately, she found out that she missed the parade when her father drove past her school and all of her friends were parading around in their own Halloween costumes. The father's mental, emotional, and physical abuse. The physical abuse happened towards my grandmother, so thankfully he was not abusive to them physically. But the mental and emotional abuse seen by the physical abuse all contributed to her own thinking, and it contributed to her own mental and emotional status. Think of being a young child and being involved in that and sitting in the forefront was a lot. Also, taking away the happiness of her own accomplishments. She was extremely smart, still is very, very smart. So, taking away from the accomplishments of herself when she should be so excited and proud and happy that she worked so hard to get where she was in life, and he took it away by being belligerent and drunk all the time. So, the other factors would be genetic factors, so possibly herself becoming an alcoholic, but she decided to go the other way and decided to not drink. She would enjoy occasional drinks here and there, but never to the point where she got excessive and used it as a coping mechanism. When she did feel herself becoming too dependent, or when she did feel herself relying a little bit or getting too out of control, I should say, with her alcoholic beverages, then she cut it cold turkey. Also, within that family system, my one uncle, he chose the path of his father and was involved in a lot of drinking. He lost jobs because of it, and he also ran into troubles with the law. As you can see, my aunt went the opposite direction. So some behavioral factors would be the peer reactions of coming from a small town. Everyone talks, so everyone knows your business, which unfortunately is awful. But so everyone knew what she was going through. She was at a party for her own graduation, and her father was completely obliterated drunk, and he would black out, and he made a complete fool of her in front of her friends. But she decided to rise above that and not let whatever her peers were saying about her influence her, because she did meet great academic accomplishments and accomplishments within and of herself. The social conditions would be social supports, so implementing advice from the family and friends around her to persevere and rise above. Somebody once told her, don't let his actions take away from your accomplishments, which was huge, and it stuck with her, and she will always remember that because she genuinely faced a lot of adversity and overcame that adversity, which is monumental. So, some things that shaped her future was the economic oppression. They came from a lower class family, a lower than middle class family, and they didn't have a lot of money. Her father used all of his paycheck on drinking and never really contributed to finances. So her mother had to take on a lot of the stress and a lot of the burden. She worked as a restaurateur, I guess you could say. She worked as a sandwich maker in a deli. And she would work from, very early in the morning to late at night to get them by because she could not rely on her husband to help her. The mental abuse and the struggle to keep going and the struggle to overcome was heavy. She resolved these issues by emphasizing her education as a way out of her situation and as a way to get away from it. Also, to not have to fall into that slump. She had a devoted mother who was selfless and gave everything to her kids and worked harder than anyone, I could have ever think of. I unfortunately did not get to meet her as she passed away at a young age from a stroke. So some of the other supports that she had were the same as everyone else in the town. It was a predominantly white Irish Catholic lower class family and neighborhood that they all lived in. So everyone really went to the same school. They went to the same jobs. They worked in the same factories. There was no really differences. So they all understood, but at the same time, they didn't really know that this abuse was happening, especially the physical abuse towards her mother. So some of the psychosocial crisis resolution from a multi-lens systems theory would be the immediate family. Her older brother had high academic success. He became a priest, whereas her two middle siblings, well, not middle, but her two other siblings were had lower academic aspirations because they did go to college, but they got an associate's degree, and one works in the medical field and another person works in a factory setting. The school, city, and family perspective would be there was positive peer supports from her community and her adults, which was huge for her because her teachers really influenced her to push and rise above, and they pushed her to the limits because they knew that she could do it and she could, put whatever, do whatever she wanted if she put her mind to it. Also, she delivered her salutatorian speech at her graduation despite the embarrassment from her father's previous actions at the party before. So her father was intoxicated, made a fool of her and her family, but she pushed through and she made her salutatorian speech at her high school graduation, and she still remembers it to this day. Also, above social forces pushed the individual past preconceived expectations of what a successful life would be. And she pushed and she persevered to her own successful life. People probably thought that, she was going to be an alcoholic or that could be possible, or she was going to settle in the same town and have the same, aspirations as they all did. But she didn't. She had higher aspirations. She left that town. She met her husband in a different city, and she really persevered and pushed through any preconceived notions that people had of her.